that we use right now are things that were developed during what the Middle Age, I think for most part, the medieval area, the medieval time period. Sorry, you know, back in the 1500s and around that time, and so it's usually very much unprepared to deal with anything that is technology related. So it takes them often much time, and the issue as well is that when they develop those laws is that they have very little to no understanding of those things, and have they're usually not humble enough to request the help of the people that actually do understand those those new areas or those emerging technologies and industries.
I think thanks Jonathan. Please mute there. Just there was a question or just a point of understanding that Tembega raised. Just asking how do they monitor? They referring to the government. How does the government get to monitor these guys or such a service? The only thing that I'm aware of right now, it is an operating license from the traffic department. So before you can even register on the platform, you need that license. You also need a PDP, I think. And then apart from that, those are the things that I'm aware of. And then in terms of tax, I know very well that that industry is not taxed. So that's the only form of monitoring that I'm aware of from the government.
I think that's actually interesting because, in a sense, that means they're not necessarily monitoring. They're not monitoring the industry per se, but they just need to make sure that they monetize aspects of it and they get to benefit in some way. Um, yeah, I think that's quite interesting because at the end of the day, I doubt our government would know what to do with that kind of information. Um, but yeah, that's interesting.
Just looking at the main question that we were talking about, one of the other pointer that I just remembered right now, some of the benefits that this platform has got to the society, it 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 links with unemployment, yes, but it's a different perspective. Because such a platform, it does offer drivers that flexibility and that freedom of being able to work on their own hours that they are available on. And yeah, that's just what I remembered. Part of the benefits that we're talking about.
I think it's Kawe who mentioned this earlier that as much as it does have benefits, but it's for like a select few. Because even benefiting someone who's unemployed, there are a lot of unemployed people who do not have access to their own vehicles who would be able to start such a service. Um, so I think it's looking at the scope of like our country as a whole, it's just a very limited amount of people who would have that benefit of using such services, whether it's as a driver or as a user of these platforms. Um, yeah, I think it's very limited.
I hear what you're saying, ne? But I think it's not too limited in a sense that I know quite a few drivers who have bought their own vehicles through being a driver. They first started as being an Uber driver or Taxify driver, and then later on they ended up with that money buying their own uh, form of transport, and then being able to make money out of that and owning all of that money, and that money coming to them. And then I also know that if you cannot find a driver, you can go to the website for Uber or even Bolt and request a driver there. So there are drivers who are waiting and readily available um, there on that platform to assist or to get a job. So I wouldn't say it is limited, uh, but of course, it's, I feel like it's flexible.
Um, like let's say when you look at the people who are unemployed immediately from like matric, how many of those people do you know that already have a license or would be willing to go into this? Because right now the youth, like there's like a large percentage of youth that is unemployed, and I feel like they don't necessarily have access to, you know, they don't get to benefit from this service. So I still feel like not a large amount of people get to benefit from these services.
Uh, if I may speak, I don't think that solving that issue is incumbent upon Uber, Bolt, or any other local hailing service provider. That is a government issue, you know. They come with a tentative solution. Now we have a business model that we can offer to the people of the country. But on the broader scale, the unemployment issue is something that the government has failed to tackle. It is, not was, and it is the responsibility of the local government to handle, you know, because today's economy has shifted from material to more from the commodities or material to being an information based economy. You know, it is an information based economy, and the government, say in Africa in general, we have dismally failed at adapting to those changes and factors. Or you have countries, for example, like Japan, who do not have any natural resources and yet thrive on the global economic scene because they were able to foresee the change and anticipate, you know. So I don't think that it is their responsibility to solve. We cannot blame them or nor fault them for not catering to the broader community because at the end of the day, they are a private model and they simply provide you with a platform, you know. And so the broader issues is the government's responsibility.
Um, I do get I do get that, Jonathan. I was just saying, like, in terms of it being an advantage, yes, it is an advantage, but it's an advantage to the few who have access to it. Yeah, I felt like as much as yes, we're speaking about e-hailing services, but it had to be in our context as well. So I was just putting that out there.
Oh yes, I do want to say that, you know. Yes, but it's not just here, it's practically anywhere. If you have 50 million plus inhabitants in a country, I don't think that any solution would be large enough to solve the problem. But you probably need a combination. You need a variation of several solutions, you know, that you'll have to pair and combine so that you can tackle the issue. But yeah, I don't think that there will ever be a silver bullet solution, you know. But yeah, I do understand your point.
I do get the point that Tembega mentioned, that she still feels like it is limited. Look at metrics who have got access to such a platform. And there's not much I can say about that, but just looking at, let's look at it in a different perspective. How many matriculants have got a smartphone, and how much on average does the smartphone they carry cost? And when we're looking at that, it takes us to a point that looks at priorities, because with that smartphone you can easily get a license, you can easily get a PDP, you can easily get that permit from the traffic department, and then you can start being a driver. So I do feel like the platform, it is flexible. Of course, one needs to be serious about it. Um, so yeah, that's just what I think.
Oh, there is another point that or factor came into mind.
Um,
Because
Actually, even the point of matriculants and licenses and all of that, I did see an article that was saying something about how South Africa would like to implement the driving license into schools. So I think similar to a system that they have in America and all those other countries, they would like to implement something where students can get their licenses from school. So I think if they were to do such a thing, it would be quite helpful. But also, I'm not sure how that would benefit directly the e hailing services, or would that in a way just create an influx and end up creating a situation where people barely benefit? Yeah.
uh, can you guys hear me?
Yes, I can hear you on my side, Jonathan.
All right, thank you. So just uh, on that note, the issue we're talking about how the reach of healing services was limited. I remember not so long ago for my work, I was working with a company that serves as a recruitment agency for e-hailing services, and they were actually complaining of a shortage of drivers, that there were not enough people registering, and they were in need of at least close to 8,000 people. The last time I checked, I don't know if I can remember. Let me try to see if I still have that conversation. And it was it was in a case where they're like, we have the opportunity, but we do not have enough people and like enough locals who are willing to take to take that up, to take up those opportunities. And it was quite a substantial number of people. But again, if you're going to count anything in millions, in terms of an employed population, that was barely a dent. It's like maybe a
Mm.
drop in the sea, but there was a significant number of people that could have benefited, but that were either not just interested or not willing, or maybe not just informed enough so that they could actually capitalize. Because what I'd remember is that the platforms are even willing to let those people come in, be trained, and provide them with scooter bikes, for example, for those who would be willing to do deliveries for either Mr. D, Uber Eats, and Dash, or whoever else it was.
Ah, I was about to disagree with you until you mentioned that it's scooters. There is like this perception within the country. I think everyone I've ever met, or even like adults, like they instill this in their kids that motorbikes are like not safe at all. So there aren't that many people who drive motorbikes. But I was going to say that um, like in a lot of Ubers and Bolts and whatever, you have the drivers complaining that there are too many people now compared to maybe like 2 years ago. And the fact that there are a lot of people now means that they don't get as many rides and they can't really get as much profit as they used to before. Um, yeah, but now that you mentioned that it's motorbikes, like scooters, it makes sense that there aren't that many people willing to, learn how to drive a scooter and all of that.
I think on the sense that there aren't as there are. I mean, the industry isn't as profitable. I think it's just natural. The more competitors you have within a specific industry, the smaller the cake becomes that you have to share becomes. I think if the infrastructure allowed for it, I think South Africa is big enough. The road network is uh, well enough. It was well maintained. Many would have been able to participate into that economy, but at a local scale. For example, if you came from the Eastern Cape, you wouldn't have need for you to travel all the way, for example, to East London or what is the one Port Elizabeth? They changed the name. I can't just say that name. The clicking didn't die. Doesn't work quite well, but
It's called
yeah,
Ukabeja. That's
I,
why.
I can't I can't say that because uh, in none of the languages that I've known until I got to South Africa, are you required to click your tongue to say a word. So
Mm.
I've never come across that, but yeah. So there is also that the issue. Going back to the issue that Tembeg had mentioned earlier on is that it's the government's job to create the appropriate climate and infrastructure to allow the private sector to thrive on. If you do not do that, you know, you may have the most brilliant mind of minds. You may have uh, the best of ideas even available locally, but it's only those who are able or those who are in a space where those ideas can be accommodated that will benefit from it, you know.
And I remember just part of the what these guys are going through now. I mean, the e-hailer, the drivers, and some of the owners as well. There was just a protest. It was last year. There were, I think it was on the 12th of November, if I can remember properly, but it was towards the end of the year, whereby they were just demanding the government to intervene. And simply one of the reasons that they were protesting for was the commission, that the platform, the service providers, their commission is just too much. And it was 25%. And honestly, that's a rip-off, because that basically means that those guys are left with 75% of whatever they made. Now they have to eat, they have to pay fuel, they have to pay insurance, they have to pay installments. So those are just some of the challenges that the drivers are facing. And of course, taxi drivers are on their case. Lately, I haven't heard anything, but it seems quiet for now. But I'm not so sure if those conflicts are still happening. But what are some of the challenges that you guys know of that drivers are facing?
I think the competition with the taxi industry is is the is the biggest because they cannot operate as freely as they would or as they could. At some point, I remember there are areas where they cannot actually step in. For example, the taxi ranks they are only allowed to drop people, but they cannot pick. that also depends on the nature of the drivers around there, and some of them, although there is kind of those implicit agreements, that's the word I was looking for, they cannot always operate freely, because the taxi industry, the taxi operators do take badly at competition, and so they feel like they are being cheated on if there is a no player coming in. Also, there is the issue uh, uh, of the commission, but I don't know how much authority the government could have on that, because those are agreements between private, you know, and yeah, but I think those are all the issues that I know of on their side.
I think they also have a lot of issues with just getting hijacked, especially when working at night. Whereas a lot of people who go out late at night, that's when I feel I usually need like an Uber the most, like when it's really late at night and I need to move around. Um, so I think, yeah, they do also experience like a lot of hijackings and theft as well. Even if it's not hijacking, people like smash and grab and all of that stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, you're correct. When you're talking about hijacking, I've heard a few of them actually just complaining that they get hijacked, and then the hijackers leave with the car and leave with the cell phone, the smartphone. And then now what the hijackers then do, they continue accepting requests and robbing the clients. So that is just one of the challenges that the guys were also complaining about, saying that now at the end of the day, when the culprit is being traced, it links to the profile of the guy who was hijacked and left alone with nothing. And at the end of the day, his image or her image is messed up, because it ends up getting circulated around social media, and then they lose almost everything they've got.
I think then that kind of brings us to the safety aspect of all of this. Because, for example, when you're using Bolt, that's when that becomes like more of an issue. Because with Uber, you have the driver saying that they have to use facial recognition software before they get to start driving. Whereas Bolt doesn't have those kind of regulations. And that's why you have Bolt drivers having such issues. Um, yeah. What do you think, Jonathan?
On the safety issue, I think yes, there is a general perception that Uber is generally safer, because I think when they do go register, they need that uh, facial recognition of facial ID. But is it also with them on a daily basis that they would need to do it every day before they start every ride? If yes, I don't think that solves that's still much of a safeguard against an hijacker, because if you had already logged into the system, I can just come in on that day and you know, carry on with that, and it doesn't protect you if someone comes to you with a gun. I remember just last year actually, or late last year, I'd requested, and the driver was telling me that he was hijacked at not even at night. It was just during the day. People requested, and as soon as he got there, they pulled out guns on him once they got inside. They asked him for his banking details, and they took the car and they just carried on with it. You know, so I don't see how the facial recognition would solve that issue, because if you had already, like I mentioned earlier on, logged into the system for that day, a person could just carry on. I don't think that it does require you to verify after a certain hour time
Um,
period.
it actually does. Like after a certain amount of trips or a certain amount of time, it does ask for
Uh-huh.
your facial recognition again. So it's something you do multiple times during the duration of the day.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
and I was speaking in regards to that being about the safety of the the person using the service, not necessarily the safety of the driver,
Oh, more
because
about the passengers on the passenger side.
yes, because of what was said about how people get to use the people get to use the app to then scam people maybe, or like rape and all of that stuff using that person's profile. So that's what I was speaking to.
Yeah. Okay, okay, go, go. Please.
Your kids want to join, Jonathan.
Yes, that's my younger brothers. So they,
Oh.
yeah, they are being as active as they can. Well, that's what young people do. Uh, on the safety of the passenger side, yes, I think now that you've mentioned, you put it into that perspective. Early in the year, it was just in January, I requested, and it actually showed me a lady, you know. And once the driver came in, it was a man,
Mm,
and just by his name and accent, because it the lady that it showed had a Sutu name, and
mm,
the guy that comes in was Nguni by the name, by the accent, by the looks of him, and it
yeah.
was quite uncomfortable for me. Although I'm a man, it was quite uncomfortable, and I had to share the ride with a friend, with just a
Mm,
few people, two, three people around me, and then I reported the driver after that, because the profile did not match, and
yeah.
so I take serious issue with those things, and at times even if it so happens just on that day that it was raining and I was in a rush to get to where I was going, but
Mm,
under normal circumstances, when I notice such a discrepancy, whether it's in the car that was originally mentioned in the app, I'd usually cancel that trip and request for a new one. You know.
yeah. But you could have
Hmm.
also been robbed. So that was very brave on your part because you could have been robbed. You could have also been raped. You could have been killed. Yeah, a lot could have happened.
Yes. Well, I
But
think yes. Go on. Go
yeah,
on.
no, I was just gonna say, but that's low key how every woman experiences Ubers every single day. Like you need to send that location every time,
I
regardless of whether or not that discrepancies or not.
you know every I had mentioned that to a friend of mine once. I was like, I have female friends who always have to, who would like oftentimes require ask of me to request for her because it felt safer that way. It's like, no, actually, this person and it's request coming from a man, so this person is expecting that I was expecting her to come through, and so they would be caught up, and it was quite unsettling, to have that knowledge that you have other people have to live through, but the ladies have to live through that, and so I guess
Mm,
it speaks also. I think the safety issues with Bolt and with transport just speaks about the safety issue on a larger scale. A joke I
mm,
usually make with my friends is that I come from Congo, and I remember countless instances where I walked with my laptop in hand from a distance, let's say from Bram all the way to APK. I just held my laptop in hand and just walked in the street, and it never dawned on me that somebody could just appear and then snatch it. You know, the first time I was robbed ever in my life was here in South Africa,
Mm,
and it was I was shocked more than anything that this actually happens, that this actually real something that happens.
yeah.
But again, because I think on this as well, it's above a public and a private issue where the platforms are responsible for ensuring that the people that they vet their drivers properly. Do they have criminal records? Do they, uh, to ensure that are they effectively the ones using that profile? Someone mentioned it on Metro FM's breakfast show last early in the week that it costs just 400 to buy a new Bolt profile. You know, so how do they
Mm,
authenticate those things? How do they uh, ensure that the persons that sign up are effectively the users? Because at the end of the day, if your drivers have a bad rep, then it's your platform that gets a bad rep.
mm.
So yeah.
Yeah, and I think also what you're mentioning about like the overall crime that happens in our country, that's part of the reason why you would go to like a transport service that is exclusive, where you know you're going to get exactly from the point you want to get to the next point you want to get without the things that happen in between. For
Mhm.
example, if I want to get to Newtown Junction without having to pass that whole um, yeah, that whole situation that happens there, because Newtown Junction, in order to get there, if I get there maybe by taxi, then to get from the robot where it drops me off to the actual mall, there's a lot that's happening there. There are a lot of uncomfortable situations. But now, if I'm going to use a transport service that is going to get me exactly from where I am to exactly where I need to be, then I expected to somewhat be safer. But now I feel like there's a certain unsafe aspect about the exclusivity, where that's an opportunity for people who are doing crime. That is an opportunity for people who are doing crime to like get you alone and, to attack you when you are most vulnerable and don't expect it. Yeah, so that's just crazy.
Hmm. Because you you find yourself isolated, and you're more vulnerable because yes, I may say like the example that I gave earlier on, like the driver's profile did not match with what was on the app, and I said, yeah, but I was a man. But what if they had other accomplices waiting along the road? You know, what would you do? And so all those aspects adds up to it, and so you just have to it pushes you to distrust a lot more. And I think it's not good for those who are just using the services, those platforms just in hopes of making a living, because it kind of puts everybody in a bad rap, because you cannot clearly as a passenger discriminate or vet them. So you just have to become distrustful of everyone and anything, basically.
And I think when it comes to safety nowadays, um, I don't know, maybe I'm the only one, but I feel much more safer in a taxi more than Bolt. And these concerns have been growing, and people have been reaching out to Bolt as to this is what is happening, this is our concern, these are the things that are happening, and we are not satisfied about. But it seems like Bolt is just blue ticking the whole situation. Um, I haven't had a lot of issues. I doubt I can even remember one issue that I've had or experienced about Uber. it seems like the one platform that doesn't have much problems. But when it comes to Bolt, it seems like it's just an open platform for anyone to do whatever they want to do, and the company will just blue tick the whole situation. Yeah, that's just what I think, and that has resulted in me and other people that I know of much having confidence in taxis and minibus taxis more than the platform that was supposed to bring safety to us as an alternative.
It's interesting that you mentioned how they actually just blue tick the situation. I remember last year there was there was an uproar about like safety issues in regards to Bolt and all of that, and at the time they implemented something, but literally what they implemented was just telling you steps that are going to make you safer, yet they didn't make their vetting process any safer. So it's just crazy how they're not necessarily taking accountability for the situation, they're just waiting for the storm to ride out.
I do remember
And
that. I'm sorry, John. I do remember that where they just basically started sending that notification before you boarding a vehicle. No, this is what you need to do. Ensure that the driver's profile matches the person that you get, the car make, and and all those things. I just think overall Uber seems the safer option. I don't, and Didi as well was pretty safe the few times that I used it because they sent you not only the car but the model of the car, the color of the car, you know, so that you knew what you were actually expecting from the driver, from the vehicle that you had. But it's just how they call it. They just behave like ostriches. They bury their faces in the sand, and they just hope that yeah, all is well in the world. But I think at this stage, this is where the government has has to step in, and step up. Actually, is that no, they actually have. If I don't know if there are fines. I know in the U.S., places like the U.S. and Europe, people are very quick to sue you for things like this. They would sue the service provider because these people are working for you. And so just the fear of public lawsuits does make it that they take issues like this more seriously. But I don't know what are specifically the laws here that that govern such situations and professional relationships.
Mr. Koma, your hand is up. You can go for it, my man.
Yes, thank you. As usual, I'm late again. Uh, Look, regarding the e-hailing, my longest wish was that we can have what we call ring fencing. So policy-wise, we ring fence, and we only allow South African tech companies to implement such things like e-hailing and similar tech companies. I mean, similar tech platforms. So these things, from a technical standpoint, they are no longer as difficult as they used to be. Now, what gives your Ubers and your Taxifys or Bolt power? It's primarily the market share. So how they do things, they just lowball the existing transportation market. So they just make things cheaper or far more convenient than it would make financial sense. So if the taxi industry tried to put everyone door to door, they wouldn't last, purely because they wouldn't be able to pay people, they wouldn't be able to make financial sense. But for this, let me open this. So for these companies, because of how generally Americans run their businesses. You create a business and then you pitch it and people like it and they throw money into it. Whether it succeeds or not, they don't necessarily care. So it's a gamble. So they can afford to do such. But if we were to be deliberate as a government to ring fence the whole industry, just like you see in China, the reason in China you wouldn't have taxi drivers or meter taxis fighting with taxifies or any of those funny things is because they have ring fenced and regulated that market. In South Africa, we are very reactionary. We want to wait until things go south that we act. You wait until the last minute when meter taxis are now seriously compromising the people's safety. That's when you start acting, or when so and so when we start having killings, GBV killings in Taxify, because it's notorious with these things, Taxify. Uber, it's a bit better because they take themselves serious, but as this for Bolt and Taxify, which is relatively smaller than Uber, they can't afford to implement realistic safety measures. So they just rely on wishy-washy adverts or notifications, as the previous speaker said, to just comfort you that, hey, we are trying something, we care, and along those lines. So in terms of implementing something solid, they don't. And you can't blame them. Why should they? I mean, why would you want to spend more in implementing something else while you can just run a PR campaign and soothe people's perceptions and continue making money in a lawless country where we fail to ring fence and properly regulate and enforce rules and regulations around these industries? So we must ring fence. We go the Chinese route. You ring fence something. You are not ring fencing the business itself or ring fencing the business model. You are just putting regulations and you are drawing the line that, hey, if someone gets injured in your vehicle, this is the price you'll pay. And you make it a steep price. And you don't try to implement them yourself as a government. You just make a steep price. You make it costly for them to have someone harmed in their own cars or taxis. So if you do that, they themselves will take it upon themselves to make sure that these e-hailing services are safe. They will go to the extreme. Now, in this case, I'm speaking about South African companies. So if these are South African companies, it will even be better because you can just implement a levy of some sort, a safety levy, an insurance scheme of some sort, like what you have in the Road Accident Fund, where if people get harmed, you can help them and pay for all those things, trauma counseling and medical stuff. So with these external companies that are international, your Uber and what one, they are sort of untouchable. So it's a wild, wild west. You can't touch someone financially, meaning you can't freeze their banks, you can't fine them, you can't do anything. So behind the scenes, what the governments do or what the government officials do when they're saying that they want to pursue some form of litigation against these companies, what they would do, if they do, what they would do is they will try to reach out to the company out there. As far as it is in a different jurisdiction, they will try to reach out. But it will fail, that effort will fail because that company, Uber, writes policies in accordance to their country of origin, the United States. And this is the same thing with other countries. Even Europe, Taxify is in Europe. Even Europe is a different story because they don't care. As long as they follow their own rules in Europe, they don't necessarily care about any country in Africa. If people are getting killed in Africa, no one cares. We have 400 years to show for that. But anyway, yes, so that's my input. We must ring fence. We must be deliberate with these things. If you just take things and say you do speeches and you say you empathize with people, but then you don't force companies to implement something. Companies must be incentivized or punished. That's the only two things that will push a company to implement practical measures, safety measures for people. Otherwise, they'll just continue and cash in until the gold rush ends, until the government wakes up, and by then it will be too late.
Kama, you did touch on so many important points there. I don't think there is, wherever the legislation of origin is from, I don't think that there is any country, any sensible country, even in the most banana uh, republic of them all, where that there are no laws that seek to guarantee the safety of the people, even if the legal the laws were written in the US, but when they are operating within the South African territory, they are subjected to the South African law. I don't think uh, that exempts them of any responsibility based on the South African judiciary and legal system, because I do remember that countries in Europe have sued those American multinationals for things like pollution, for bridging privacy regulations, and so forth. It's just that, like you said, in Africa, we are reactionary in general. It's a point that I did mention earlier on before you joined in. But to speak of ring fencing and something like ensuring that only the that we maybe give priority to local companies in those industries, right? It's been, I don't know, but close to 10 years since Uber came into South Africa and started operating here. Which local actor actually has decided to step up and take the fight to them? No one has done that, Just besides Take a Lot and its subsidiaries, Mr. D, on the food side, but when it comes to transport, no one has done it. I mentioned it earlier on that the taxi industry was an estimated 90 billion rand, and they were the most well-placed people to actually challenge this new paradigm in the transport industry, but they were not interested. They have never been interested. They just kept on fighting to maintain the status quo, even though they stood a better chance to actually win that battle if they were ever willing to step in and fight into it. So I think, yes, having stricter policies around those issues would be good, but also it just shows how passive we are as a people, how we have people coming all the way from the US introducing a business model for years and years on end, and no one dares to challenge them.
Yeah, that's true because I think I think it was last year when a lot of Bolt drivers started striking and just protesting, and it started slowly when they closed office and then they moved somewhere. I think they were at Sentin at that time. The Bolt offices were at Sentin, were in Sentin. And then they had to close those offices. I forgot where they moved to, but Jiggy Jiggy, after some time, they now didn't have offices and you had to do everything online. And you get to see how these guys are avoiding responsibility and avoiding to just abide with the regulations or even just treat their people in a fair way, to such an extent that they even have to close offices and you now have to do everything online, just them running away and not owning up to their chaos that they've created. But I think I agree with what Mr. Koma said in the beginning, that if South Africa can be fully invested in its own products, yes, there's nothing wrong by being inspired by an international product. But once you see that a particular product or a particular service is making a killing out there, then support locals. And I'm sure there's a lot of local individuals who have got platforms like your Ubers and your Taxifys that are just not picking up or gaining traction because Uber and Taxify and Didi, they just came with that international recognition and swept off the market. So I think if the approach could be like that, we invest locally, we make sure that we boost the startups, the great ideas that are coming from SA, and making sure that barriers to entry from the international guys entering here, we increase them to a point whereby it's almost impossible to operate in the domestic market. Then I think that is the way that could assist us to move forward. So I fully support and agree with that point.
Just giving, uh, trying to tentatively answer to that, right? So to support the local, but like I mentioned, besides Take a Lot and Mr. D, I haven't actually seen nor heard of anyone locally that came up with a similar solution to
Um,
what
I,
Bolt
I just tried to,
Bolt and Didi
sorry.
do offer. It's all right. Bolt and Didi do offer, and I don't think that there will be anyone that would refute them or would make life hard for them to join in if they were a local product. But the reality also is that we do not just in general support local products because, as an example, all the way back in 2012, when I was still in Congo, we had a young Congolese guy that studied in China and Europe, and he had a model. He came in with a cell phone, a smartphone, might I add. It was an Android. It was using the most recent Android version that was there available to the people, and he brought in the country. And that company failed to launch to be successful there because he had no support until a man from the US came in and decided to buy his his company or his startup and invest in him, and actually took him to the US to go and work with him. But he brought in his devices were up to standards, up to the norms of what was being done there. Of course, it wouldn't compete, for example, with your Apple and Samsung, but it was good enough and it could have thrived had he been supported. He had cell phones, he had tablets, but nobody ever stepped up to actually support him. So I don't think that we could ring fence and make the entry costs higher for people that are bringing in something that you yourself aren't producing or are willing to compete with, you know. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I hear you. But look, as I've said, these companies are focusing on market share. So you can't expect a Jabu or Sbusiso from somewhere who has studied tech. You can and build such a platform. You can't expect them to compete for market share with a company that has over 1 billion on its balance sheet. That's just not practical. That's why I'm saying government. The only way you can compete with such a company is to firstly ring fence, meaning make it absolutely difficult for Uber to get in, and if it gets in, it gives up a certain percentage to local players. Number two, what you'll do is you finance these companies. Now we are not speaking about support or donations. We are speaking about actual business financing, meaning you finance via some kind of a mechanism. South Africa already has good financing infrastructure, so to speak, from your IDC and even departments themselves. You finance these companies on a triple P basis, where it's you own a government owns some kind of a share, and then PIC, as representative of the people, owns a share in that company, and you also include the private person, your Jabu or your Sbusiso or your Tabu, who build the actual company. So via that model, which is trial and tested, it works. You then finance these startups, and then you will see them. You know, people don't. It's not about locals supporting anything. Not supporting a product. It's about people want quality. You can't just mure batata, and then you want to sell it to me at a market price of a what's this, a Nike or a Yeezy batata. That doesn't make sense to the consumer. So the best thing, the best thing here, it would be to first make quality. So we were speaking drip. The reason drip is popular in the country is not because of Likau or people want to support Likau. Of course, that plays a role. It's a story. It forms part of marketing. People follow stories and a person's story, so to speak. For instance, Elon Musk or Motsepe with Time Bank and stuff. So stories do play a part, but the reason people are supporting Batu or drip is primarily because of the quality, the uniqueness, and market reach. So when you are in Eastern Cape, you want Batu, you'll find it. When you are in Limpopo, you want Batu, you'll find it. When you are in so and so, you want Batu, you'll find it. So they've built an infrastructure, an actual infrastructure, and they've financed the businesses. So the businesses make sense. And in that case, you don't have to beg for support from people, from the market. The market will buy. You get, because you have already taken care of business, so to speak. So this is the same case with this Uber things. The reason you can't compete with Google, or you can't compete with Facebook or Twitter, from it, as I've said, from a technical point of view, those things are simple. You code them with a team, you can get the same quality or even better as TikTok or as Twitter. The major thing is financing. Business is not just the platform. You can build the platform, but that's not the business. That's just a mere product. So business is not only drip, the fancy shoe you have designed. You need to have a proper infrastructure to deliver that shoe to the people. You need to have a proper infrastructure to finance the manufacturing, the quality control, and the further design and development of that shoe. Same principle applies with the apps, your Uber apps. They might be digital. It doesn't mean they're absorbed from the requirements of a functioning business. At the end of the day, they still need proper financing. They still need the proper infrastructure for them to thrive. So it's unfair to say we don't support our people. Because that way you make it sound like it's a pandemic of black people not supporting. Look, I can go to China, and if I have proper financing, I don't care if the Chinese are racist towards a black person. I'll succeed in that environment because I'm not coming on an emotional basis to them. I'm not begging for mercy or donations. I'm not running an NGO, so to speak. I am coming to them running a solid business with a solid, infrastructure that can deliver on their needs. That's all. I don't necessarily care who owns the taxi that takes me from somewhere to Jozi or from Joziburg. I don't necessarily care. Is it Kumalo? Is it Spanyoni? Is it Ndebele? I don't necessarily care who owns it. I don't care about their politics. What I care about is the need they're fulfilling at that particular time. And I'm willing to pay for that need because that transaction makes logical sense. I give you so-and-so amount, a fair market amount, and you give me a product. So the other thing is also pricing. So there are many people, there are many other alternatives to Uber that are existing out there. You might not have seen them fairly because they of the reasons that I've mentioned, the market share and so on. So you might find that somewhere in a certain locale, someone is thriving by transporting what's this stuff from point A to B. For instance, there's this guy called Ramsey. He's Jim Tsega's son. He also implemented something like that. He was advertising in Gautrain and all that. So I guess he's focusing on the premium market. So your Santon and so on, instead of the what's this? Instead of the wide market, the wider market. So these things, alternatives do exist, but we need to be deliberate in helping them thrive. So that's my input.
Shiane, that was a very interesting one, and I honestly and totally agree with that. It is
Yes,
not necessarily that we don't support the upcoming guys. It is just that we support uh, as far as we can. But the government also has a huge responsibility to make sure that they push these upcoming